if you pulled up the Herald yesterday, you would have noticed that Massachusetts has exceeded $700 million in FY25. That's the current fiscal year. In fact, we've spent $706 million on Healey Hotels as of the report that was just released the other day. And here we are by the numbers. Herald does a great graphic here. We spent $707 million. We're still projected this fiscal year to spend $1 billion. That's $2,900 weekly per family. How much is your monthly mortgage or your monthly rent? A lot of you are going to say, oh, it's about $3,000 for a month. They're spending $3,000 a week. 4,900 families in shelter as of April 17th. $77 million spent on Home Base, a housing assistance program. So, a lot of people are asking, where are these families going? Theoretically, they're getting jobs and becoming productive, illegal members of our society. But a lot of them are actually just transitioning to apartments, driving up the demand for apartments, and having that paid for by you. So if you're grandma and you have a job working at the window at Dunkin' Donuts and you're actually working hard to pay your rent, understand that part of your rent is actually going to pay, part of your taxes is going to pay the rent for a family that's here illegally. Insane. How much do they hate you? How much do they hate you? By the way, I just want to double check my comments over here. No comments yet, but if you have a comment, fire it away. Happy to have you today. Thank you so much for joining us. Here is the chart. Now, this chart is just slightly behind schedule because right now we're just under 5,000 families. If you notice, we are right now, in terms of the population in the shelters, we are at the same number of families as we were in the peak of the great financial crisis, in the aftermath of the great financial crisis, which peaked out in late 2015. In late 2015, we were also at 4,900 families, and then it started to fall, as you can tell by the chart. Understand that our natural non-great financial crisis, non-invasion numbers should be well sub 3,000. And in fact, the 50-state median is 430. And it really is. And let me just scroll up a little bit because I want to read the caption here on this graph. This shelter law, it is not a right. This shelter law actually traps people in unstable housing. The shelter industrial complex has been out of control for years. It is not compassionate. It keeps kids trapped in Massachusetts' unstable housing. Without a shelter law, it would never have been an issue. And I want to again stress, so many people, even Republicans, so-called conservative, have bought the line that it's a right to shelter. That is incredibly dangerous because there is no right to shelter in Massachusetts. This program is a program. That's all it is. If you read the law, the shelter law, the first words of the shelter law are subject to appropriation. Do not equate the shelter law with your, for instance, any of the rights that exist in the Bill of Rights. Do not equate the shelter law with the First Amendment or with the Second Amendment or any of these are apples and oranges. They're not the same thing. There is no right to shelter. It is just simply a law that is not an entitlement, if you want to use that word, not an entitlement. So excellent graph once again. And, of course, on the front page of the Herald, John Featherston commenting for the win. 49 states sit back and laugh, thinking, what the hell is Massachusetts going with this ridiculous doing with this ridiculous, and even John Featherston uses the wrong phrase, right to shelter law. Stop using it. It's not a right to shelter. Just call it the shelter law. $4 billion spent, no end in sight. Also with home-based subsidies, stop. The real chaos is begin. Ticking time bomb. And there you have your cover of today's Boston Herald. Hotel closed to the public. Yeah. Hotel closed to the public. It was an excellent expose by Nate Friedman. If you hadn't seen it, we featured it over at Massive U-Turn yesterday. We featured it yesterday. It was at the top of the fold yesterday. By the way, if you're not starting your day or finishing your day with visiting over at massiveuturn.com, it makes it so much easier to find the news of the day. There's your link to the Herald article. There's the chart that we were just talking about a moment ago. And then look at all these stories that are important to you. And they're all linked right here. Homeless problem in Hyannis. You just click the link and boom, there it is. They're all right there. HR director at Boston Water and Sewer fired. There you go. All right there. And that is over at massiveuturn.com. massiveuturn.com. Massachusetts headlines from me. What could be better? Massiveuturn.com. Well, yeah. Yeah, it's a good name. It is a good name. I have to give credit to my wife. She came up with it. All right. Getting back to Duncan Burns. That 6.3% state budget increase will continue to impoverish people with bigger government, Duncan says, especially local government. Massachusetts is a pay-to-play state. A huge chunk of subsidizing the non-government organizations, nonprofits, are just legalized money laundering schemes and are subsidizing the invaders. Getting back to our top story, which is we're, again, on schedule to spend $1 billion on emergency shelter. Understand, we're going to spend way, way more than $1 billion on the invasion this year. $1 billion is what we're projected to spend just on the hotels. Set aside what we're going to spend to educate, transport, feed, all the things. You know the things, right? It's and plus the home base money. It is way more than $1 billion a year. But when you want to save a congressional seat, you'll spend as much money, since it's not yours, to save it, right? Because the whole idea is to boost up our population. We are now the number 4th state. We're the 4th state in outward migration. You don't want to lose a congressional seat if you're Maura Healey. And so you have an invasion to boost the population. That's exactly what's going on, because every head counts in the census, even if you're not here legally. We know where the money is going, and then it's sent right back to the political coffers. Here, Duncan is pointing to Elliott Community Health Services from Lexington, Massachusetts. And basically, he pulled up the donor profile, and it's all a cycle. Like the CEO of these big nonprofits, they donate to politicians, they get the you know the thing. It's just a big cycle with your money. So you're struggling to pay the rent or your mortgage, and they're taking part of your paycheck to give it to other people that are here. It's just insane. It's come like so normal that it's just really hard to wrap your head around. The Massachusetts GOP yesterday afternoon says, when so-called reforms have loopholes big enough to drive an 18-wheeler through, they're not reforms, they're political theater. Yes, agreed. That's why Governor Healey keeps hemorrhaging hundreds of millions of dollars in taxpayer dollars 2026 can't come soon enough. Right. She's done the reforms. Hold on. Let me get my air quotes. Done the reforms. But remember, if she had her way, she'd open the floodgates again. She wanted the invasion. She wanted, and the Democratic Party wanted the invasion. They think that demographics are destiny. They want the invasion. Remember, she was running around saying, oh, if we only had the border bill, I could handle this problem better. Two problems with that. One, we're the only state with a shelter law, as John Featherston pointed out. We're the only state. No other state has it. No other state wants it. And two, we didn't need the amnesty bill. We just needed a new president with the will to close the border, which is exactly what we just got. And now we need a new governor. All right. I was looking at that quote from the Massachusetts GOP. Let's bring it up again. And I had not heard this term loophole referred to before in regards to the context of the reforms that Governor Healey had put in. But Mike Keneally, who's running for governor, declared candidate on the Republican side, $700 million is too much. As governor, I'll reform the right to shelter law to serve only Massachusetts families just as it was meant to. I'll close the Healey loopholes. That's interesting. At 2:34 yesterday, he said he'd close the Healey loopholes. The Massachusetts GOP says that the reforms have been loopholes, and that went out at 1:56 yesterday. It's almost as if Keneally is reading the Mass GOP tweet. I don't know. I'm sure they're not coordinating. No, that would not be possible. I'm sure they're not coordinating. I'm sure it's just a pure coincidence that he used the same terminology that the Massachusetts GOP did 35 minutes earlier. Absolute coincidence. Nonetheless, my question to you, Michael, is if $700 million is too much, how many hundreds of millions are you okay with spending? If $700 million is too much, is $200 or $300 million okay with you, Michael? Because let me tell you what's going on here. There are now so many vested interests in the shelter law. So many people clinging on for their paycheck that it's impossible to reform this program. We just saw Governor Healey try to reform the program. It cannot be reformed. It is not a right, and it is subject to appropriation. The only way to fix this program, if you want to fix it at all, the only way to fix this situation is to zero out the program. Cancel the program. Well, Jack, that's a radical idea. Who would ever do that? All the other states would do that. No other state has this program. We can't cancel this program. That's inhumane. No other state has the program. No other state has the program. Why? It's not out of the we are the weirdos that have the program. And it cannot be reformed. It has to go to zero. Because if you try to reform it, as we've seen with the Trump administration, there'll be boatloads of lawfare lawsuits that will try to stop you from constricting the availability of the program. You know that's coming, right? If you do anything, if you try with any meaningful reform, if you try to close any of these real loopholes, you'll be sued and it'll be lawfare. The only way to move forward on this effectively is to bring it to zero. Zip, bye-bye. If you then, after you do that, from the ashes, still want to have a discussion about, okay, what can we do for homeless veterans? What can we do for families that are suffering immediate threat from domestic violence? Then I'm all for that. Let's have a discussion about that then. But this program cannot be reformed. If you come to me and you're saying, well, $250 million a year is something I could live with. No, you'll never get there because they're not going to allow you to get there. They're going to sue you. We've already seen this with the Trump administration.